We just saw the level of tension that is in these horses' muscles. She's a very kind horse. She did not reach around to bite or act ill-tempered, but that's what can come next. So it's one of their only ways to tell us that their stiffness and pain is too much. I like to give people the analogy that if I strapped a backpack on them, didn't really pay a lot of attention to how it fit, and it weighed 25% of their body weight. Now we're going hiking for 4 hours, and we do it maybe once a month. We're going to hike some hills and some valleys, and they cannot discuss how their backpack feels. If it starts to hurt, what would they do? They said, well, I just quit. I'm like, okay, that's valid, but I'd probably kick you and make you get up and keep going. They're like, well, I might try and rub it off on a tree. I said, horses have tried to rub people off on trees. And they said, well, I just lay down. I said, horses do that too. So listen to what your horse is telling you. So, given that analogy, when you have a saddle tree, and there is no industry standard for these, you have the gullet, you have the bars, which form the structure that lay on your horse's back. This is referred to as the ear. This is flare, and the distance measured across the bottom of the bars is the bar spread. That determines the angle that the bar sits on. So we're trying to make this solid thing work on something that has a lot of movement. When you place a saddle on a horse, you can see on this mare that this saddle sits, I'm going to stand behind so it's a little more obvious. A lot of people place their saddles up here, thinking the horn needs to be over the horse's shoulders. You can see that that is too high. And notice that she raised her head up and she swished her tail. When I push down on it, you can see the saddle has an uphill slope. This mare is going to push this saddle back, and the ear of the bar, this bar is too angled. It doesn't even touch anything here, and it's already pushing on the edge of the shoulder blade. Charity, I'm going to put just a little pressure on this horn. I want you to try and slide your hand under that tree.
Can't do it.
You can't do it. Now I want you to pick up her foreleg. And she doesn't see how she doesn't really want to pick up her foreleg. And look at that. Look at the pressure. I'm just putting about 15 pounds of pressure on this horn. Can you imagine a girth and a person? Her pressure is going to be concentrated here. And look at how the bars are digging into the back. This is where most people have a lot of problems. As she moves, that saddle may slide into the hole behind her shoulder blade. Well, now it's sitting far back. Now the gullet is resting on top of her withers, so you cannot get your finger in there. Now she seems more free right here, but it is sitting in the hole, and now it is falling downhill. I want you to pick up the foreleg again. Now the saddle is behind the shoulder blade, but notice how she drops her shoulder and she won't pick it up. It's because the saddle is digging in the hole behind the shoulder blade. So you can see right there, we're going to pull the tree off, and I want you to pick up her foreleg again. Not a problem. So she's very kind. She has not complained, but put her head up a little bit. Let's square her foot back up. Notice when she just saw that tree coming, she hollowed out and picked up her head. What I want to be clear about is anything that we look at on this mare right now is in a negative body posture. We are fitting the sore horse. I want something dynamic in between the horse and the saddle that allows her to heal, that allows the back to come up and those muscles to redevelop a positive muscle memory, something that can let her heal. And that requires something very dynamic. And that's how we're going to show you how the CSI pad works. So again, as we lifted her back before, watch how much a proper body posture affects the way the saddle looks. you can see how it dramatically influences. It fills up the middle. Now there's a gap here. It still is the wrong fit in front, but that might be changed with proper padding and possibly a shim. One last point I want to make. This is just a placeholder here. On a saddle, in a Western saddle, there is a slot between the seat strainer and the bar that the stirrup leather runs around. So your fender and stirrup hang here with a stirrup leather. Most trees do not have a groove for the stirrup leather. This is just a thin piece of leather. Most stirrup leathers are quite thick, and that makes a lump where that comes across the bar. And many horses, where that comes across, and you can see that little groove right there, makes them very sore. So that's a further complication of saddle fit, where that flex panel we're going to investigate with the CSI Saddlepad helps the whole fit. To further illustrate my point, the Flexplate in the CSI Saddlepad contours to the problem areas in a horse's back. So we have this flexible panel shape. Now I'm going to hold my hand here, Charity, and I'd like you to pick up her foreleg again. Yeah, and you can feel the shoulder move up underneath here. I'm going to demonstrate that with the same tree we just had on her. To give you a bit better visual of what we're looking at, here are the internal components of the Flexplate, and you can see the fingers and how they work. You can see the fingers and how they work as the horse's shoulder blade. Why don't you pick up her leg again? I'm just going to hold a little pressure there. And I can feel her shoulder blade come right up under the core component of the Flexplate. Right here is the back side of her shoulder blade. That is where saddles make the most contact. So we've got 3 layers there that are flexible, that move with the horse, contour into the middle of the back, and then again, where we get some bridging in the back, we've got 3 layers. And this panel can flex and move in a way that the saddle can't. So we provide a dynamic layer between the horse's body and the hard saddle. Charity, if you could just keep your hand there for a moment. Again, the same tree placed on top of the Flexplate, you can see that as I push on this, she hasn't picked up her head. Is this a perfect solution yet? No, but it gives us an idea. You can see as I push into the back, the Flexplate is giving. I'll stand in the back and do that. The Flexplate gives, and the horse isn't changing her body. That's an indicator to me that we've got more comfort. This is designed to protect those vital areas of the horse's back. To reiterate that, horses will tense up in the front of the long back muscles and at the back of the long back muscles. And in turn, when these 2 muscles are, the origin and insertion are irritated, they're going to hollow through the middle. I'll begin from here. This might be a better view. That's what we're trying to protect, so that when the horse is performing, they can round and use their abs and get their pelvis into position. Her soreness makes that a little difficult for her. But even those few lifts, she's starting to hold a more positive posture. We've looked at some saddle fit issues with Reagan, and the next thing I want to introduce you to is a CSI saddle pad and how we're going to apply it to this horse. Features of the pad that work really well, whether the horse is high withered like Reagan or low withered and round like Donna's horse Fancy, is that it's contoured to the back. It's lifted for the withers, it comes down in the middle, lifts again. It is a three-layered system. We have the top layer with the flex panel stitched in between, and then we have a removable felt liner that is attached with Velcro. You can replace the liner. You can use a number of liners that Donna offers, from a half, 3/4, and potentially a fleece-lined liner that we're working on now. When I add the pad to the horse, you ready, girlfriend?
Of course.
Okay. I'm going to put this on Reagan, and I always start the pad up higher and let it shift back. This is just a 30-inch pad. So for this mare being about 15 hands, 15-1, she's a very short-backed horse. Just to bring that point to light, this mare has an extremely deep shoulder and a very deep hip. So even for her size and being a thoroughbred, what's happened is her shoulder is so deep that it brings the wither processes deep into the back. So our girth area is way up here, but we still have wither processes that we need to accommodate for well into the first third of her back. So when I put the pad here, it makes perfect sense to me that this pad matches her wither shape. I don't want the pad or the saddle to push down on the top of the spine processes here on the top of the withers. This mare has a slight deficit behind her shoulder. I'm not sure if she needs a shim or not, but this is one of the ways that I check. As I flip the top layer of the pad up, you can see the contour into her back. This is a perfect fit. There's no gap. And here is her shoulder blade. As I run and push my hand over the top of her shoulder blade and come down the back side, I cannot make a hollow behind the shoulder blade. And the area that I'm looking at is right here. It's nice and smooth. This feels smooth. There is no need for a shim at this time on this horse. The next step is to saddle her. She's a very high, slim withered horse, and I would pick a saddle that has a narrower gullet. This is a reining saddle. Here again is my gullet on a finished tree. This has a steeper bar angle than the bare tree of the barrel saddle we just looked at. I think this angle for the saddles we have here today more closely matches the shoulder angle of the horse we're saddling. When I go to saddle a horse, it's very important to me how I put a saddle on a horse. I'm careful. I put it a little further forward than where I'm going to cinch it. We're going to move the saddle back till it settles into position and then go saddle up from there. When I apply a CSI pad with a saddle, right now that saddle is very uphill. It's too far forward on her shoulders. I'm number one, going to grab the pad from the bottom and push the spine of the pad up into the gullet. I'm then going to take this saddle and wiggle it back till it settles into position. In the real world, this is a long-skirted reining saddle. This is too long for this horse and too long for this pad, but it was a gullet measurement that I felt would fit this horse. When I look at where everything's sitting and I look at the rigging position, the rigging comes just a little too far back, but part of that is because of the depth. of the mare's shoulder, she's going to pull this saddle further back. This is where she wants to wear it. If you were, again, to bring this saddle forward to where you thought the rigging should line up here, most people would line their saddle up in this manner, so the rigging lined up. If you're to draw, grab my stick, the straight line, you can see that this saddle is way out of balance. It's way too far uphill, and the horse is going to slide this back into position. That's a lot more level, and by the time we cinch up, it's going to pull the front of the saddle down. Whenever you have a new pad, there's some lift to it, it's going to compress and settle down a little bit. As I'm looking at the fit of saddles and pads, one of the most important concepts for me is, how did this pad and saddle work together? And after I cinch up, I want to be sure that I can comfortably slide my hand in through the front of the pad and that there is room for that shoulder blade. Once girthed, I will have the handler pull the leg forward and feel how much pressure is behind the shoulder blade and the pad. And if we can comfortably get our hand in there, we're on our way to a good fit. If it's very tight, it's probably not going to work. All right, we're back here with Donna's horse Fancy. She's our example of a big-shouldered, wide-backed mare. So I've got another saddle here that has a more open gullet and a much wider bar spread from here to here to accommodate a rounder back in a horse. First thing I'm going to do, like we did with Charity's mare Reagan, is look at this set. Well, we looked at it with a tree. I'm going to place this saddle on Fancy's back, no pad. And I look at how this saddle sits on this horse without a pad. The pad is only enhancement to make it work better and keep the horse pain-free. Looking at this on Fancy, the saddle sits very level. It doesn't want to go anywhere. There's a lot of clearance for my hand behind the shoulder blade. When the leg is in the forward position, that shoulder blade is rotated back into the tree. I still have plenty of room. And one of the little tips that I want to offer all of you when you're looking at the fit, especially on a round horse, they're some of the hardest horses to fit because saddles tend to roll. When I place that saddle on the horse's back, can I put pressure in the stirrup in a significant amount before the saddle starts to roll off the horse? We have no girth, no pad. So I'm going to start putting pressure here in the stirrup. And I am pushing down as hard as I can. For her being as wide as she is, to have it sit down on her, stay open through the shoulders, lift up through the back, and have that much contact, that's excellent. So for me, a pad can only enhance that process. So then I ask myself, she's wide. I don't want to make her wider with a heavy pad. So when I look at the CSI pad options, this is the full-length 32-inch pad, and I have a half-inch liner instead of the 3/4 inch. So my goal is, again, to protect the shoulder blades in that back without adding too much thickness. So I'm going to hand you the pad for a second. I'll let you put that on Fancy. Again, I pull the spine of the pad up into the gullet so there's no pressure in the withers. I'll just make sure that that pad and saddle work together and aren't moving forward or back. No cinch. I'm going to push down again and see how much stability I have with this saddle fit minus the girth. And if I don't have too much pad, I can keep that same stability. Now I start to have a little bit of slip. Number one, it's a new pad. It's not quite broken yet, it's a little smooth. And anytime you add the pad, you're going to have a little more room for the saddle to come over. But for a horse that is essentially shaped like this and has almost no withers for the tree to stop at as it starts to come over the back, that's a really secure fit.
Good.
And again, as I girth up, I will continue to pull that pad up in the gullet. When I run my hand in the front, there is a lot of room. I will check it again with the leg forward, and her shoulder blade really bulges up as her leg comes forward. She's very muscular there. So she has extra bulge when her shoulder blade comes up. Some horses like Reagan stay very flat and smooth, but that is something I have to watch for on these horses. An appropriate tree width that doesn't fall into the back. And this is the perfect amount of pad. We're going to shoot in a shot of this for you so that you can see what this looks like from the front side. What I want to show here is that on a finished saddle fit with a CSI pad, we have enough clearance here where the pad has been lifted into the gullet, and here the mare's head is down. That's pushed her shoulder blade up. I can easily slide my hand in behind the shoulder blade. There's actually a gap here. I can easily get my hand in between the pad and the saddle. And Haley, if you can hold on to her, I'm going to demonstrate that with a person in the saddle. I don't have it as tight as the last time. Okay, when you're in the saddle and you want to check that fit, sit back and regular and just reach your hand down. And if you can still comfortably get your hand in between the shoulder blade and the saddle, you're getting a pressure-free wither. Before I tighten the girth, I'm going to slightly offset the saddle to the offside. As you tighten the cinch, the saddle will come centered. And utilizing the CSI pad with the flex plates, that pulls the plates evenly, both right and left, into the horse's back. So I'll start the process again. I'll lift that pad up into the gullet. I will slightly offset that saddle to the right. And then I will slowly tighten my cinch. Sometimes on the real broad horses, the pad will want to settle as you're tightening. So I'll just gently pick up the pad from the bottom and push it from both sides back up into the gullet so it doesn't put pressure there. And then I will further tighten. And it's very important that when you have a new pad, that 5 to 10 minutes into your ride, there's a little break-in period, that you get off and retighten your saddle again. Now my saddle is centered on the horse. And again, Donna had told me that she has a very difficult time getting on fancy, even with the CSI pad, and not having saddle roll. That's a common problem on wide horses. So I'm going to give it my test. I'm going to push down. And the saddle maybe moved 3/4 of an inch tops. Just going to push it back over. She's already let out a little air, so I can get a little tighter. Okay.
Looks good.
Yeah. I'm going to move her just a step, and I'm going to put a foot in the stirrup and see what we got. I never get on a horse after cinching it without at least moving them. And she'll stand still. Push her hip over a little bit. This is going to be a test. We'll see if we use this for the video or not. Okay.
Yeah. That's real
So
good.
with the right saddle fit and the right pad, I have all my weight in the left stirrup. I would not recommend doing this because it's hard on horses' withers. But I wanted to demonstrate how solid a saddle fit you can get with the right pad and the right tree.